Hi everyone. It's a wondrous and God-graced thing when we today encounter saints that are at least fairly near our own time. Of course, in the early years of the church, there were many saints, and especially the martyrs. The Lord allowed these saints to blossom forth because the church was young and it needed to expand, and this was one of the best ways for it to happen. So in those early years, we see hundreds, even thousands of saints in just the first couple of hundreds of years. Now, of course, if we discount things like, and I don't want to discount them, but things like the Russian Revolution and all the innumerable host of martyrs that have happened because of communist and other bad governments around the world, we are really left with, it seems like, only a few saints who appear in our very difficult times, at least saints that can make a real difference in our lives by an extraordinary proclamation of holiness and asceticism like the saints of old did. We might think of someone like St. John the Wonder Worker of San Francisco as someone perhaps more recent who partook of that same sort of holiness that the early saints did. But that's not to discount any one of the saints of America or anywhere around the world, because we have had a number of them, even though they don't seem to sprout forth like mushrooms like they did in the earlier years. The reasons for this, of course, are multitudinous, perhaps probably because of the very pampered and spoiled life that we find ourselves in these days, which tends to draw us away from the things that are very important to true holiness. But in 1865, there was one such saint that appeared among us. And so it's on October 5th that the Holy Orthodox Church celebrates the memory of our Holy Mother, Methodia. Now, Methodia was born on a very small island called Kimolos in the Cyclades Islands in Greece. If you go out and you look online, and or even a travel agent probably these days, you can see exactly how small the island is, very exposed to the sun, very hot, but yet quite beautiful. Well, Methodia at that time was born to a father named James and a mother named Maria, and she was from the very earliest age God-fearing. She was the second daughter out of 5 children, and she was baptized as Irene. Even though she had 5 siblings, and even though her parents were encouraging her probably along other routes, she was very devout and hardly ever missed a church service, loved the Lord from the earliest age, was someone who almost seemed marked for the path that would come. However, the parents very much wanted her to marry. And so she, being the obedient daughter, even though she did protest to them that this is not what she wanted, even though that was the case, she did accept marriage from a man from Chios. Now, this man was a seafaring man, someone who made his life on the sea, and after a number of years, he was lost at sea, never to return again. And though, of course, Methodia was very grieved at this, or the fact that any human being would lose his life or her life in such a way, at this point she decided that it was God's will that she pursue him wholeheartonsely. And that is what she did. She eventually became a tonsured nun, receiving the tonsure from an archbishop named Methodius, who gave her the name of Methodia. And so Methodia entered into the monastic life with all enthusiasm, wanting to love the Lord as much as she possibly could, wanting to express this in as many ways as she could. And then after a number of years, she retired to her own small cell. Well, word spread about the young woman named Methodia, who would spend all of her time in her cell, sleeping on a bed that was just a board, eating very sparsely, coming in to receive Holy Communion in the church on Saturdays and Sundays, and doing little else during the week in terms of sustenance. She did a lot of spiritual reading, she prayed incessantly, and she was actually enjoying the life that she had embarked upon, weeping with tears every day for her sins, but also in the hope of God's mercy. She kept an oil lamp burning in front of her icon corner at all times. They said that it never stopped. And she would communicate with the outside world only by a small window in her cell. And then she would receive only women. And the women did come to her. Her fame spread everywhere, and hundreds of people came to see her, begging her for this or that or for some help, even bringing her food and other things, which she accepted graciously and with much gratitude, but then she turned around and gave it to the poor, not keeping any of it. And she lived her life in this way for a number of years. Again, people kept coming to her all the time. She increased in holiness. Her fame also increased. It's one of these strange contradictions in the lives of the saints that they seek to run away from the world, but yet by becoming something above the world, they attract people in the world to them. And she was no different. People would come with all sorts of problems, and she would give them oil directly from the lamp in her cell, and many wondrous things happened. A man who had a tumor in his neck, she blessed, gave the oil to him, and he drank it, and the next day he was healed. A woman who was having trouble conceiving for many, many years came to her also, received some of the oil, and again she was able to conceive. There were many, many other miracles, to this day almost countless, that occurred because of the holiness of this woman and the fact that she was able, although she kept to herself, she was charitable and cared about people and would go out and help people when she had to and when she needed to. And she was not hesitant to do this, except she would always return again to her cell, to the peace and quiet and solitude that she had sought from the very earliest years of her life. Finally, in the year 1908, in the month of October, on the 5th day, Methodia, who was only 43 years old at the time, gave up her precious soul to the Lord that had loaned it to her in the beginning. From that point forward, her relics were taken, put into a wonderful church, and even to this day, miracles are worked from the oil that comes from her lamp in her tomb and from people that go there to venerate her. She's an incredible witness in a very difficult time. If you look about the Industrial Revolution, the great changes that were happening between the 19th and 20th centuries, all the tumult in the world at that time, and yet she saw the one thing needful. She knew that although not everyone is called to that life, that she was, and that it was important for her to do all she could to pursue it, and we are the benefactors because of this. Also, it's notable to mention the fact that the oil that she gave out, even when she was younger, that was curing people, was of course by the power of her own prayers and holiness of life, but also because it burned before the sacred images of our Lord and the Theotokos and the saints. And so we too should not ever carelessly burn the oil before the icons, but understand that because of that light that burns so brightly before them, sanctity also can be transmitted through that very oil. Even the most menial of all of us can have that opportunity. And so we should be very aware of this and treat all things in our lives as Orthodox Christians as sacred and worthy of respect. By the prayers of Saint Methodia, the great ascetic of Kimolos, and by the prayers of all the saints like her, may we emulate her in our daily lives, no matter what it is we're doing, and also achieve the heavenly kingdom.